Regina carried a quiet, commanding power into her hometown. To officers Grant Langford and Vance Whitaker, she looked like just another black woman behind the wheel, an easy mark for intimidation. They swaggered up with sneers and heavy flashlights, every word daring her to stay silent. Then came the shove, sharp and deliberate, echoing against metal as their laughter rang out. But what they could not see was the truth burning behind her steady eyes. 30 years of command, 4 stars earned through blood and sacrifice. A soldier's unshakable resolve forged in fire. They thought she would bow her head and take it. They were wrong. In one phone call to the Pentagon, she would destroy them all. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the next story is one you do not want to miss. The sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Regina Walker's military-issue SUV rolled through her hometown. Her decorated Army uniform felt like armor against the stares that followed her vehicle. Some filled with awe, others with barely concealed contempt. The familiar buildings had not changed much in the decades since she had left, though their worn facades seemed to mirror the town's stubborn resistance to progress. The funeral home's parking lot was already full when she arrived. Regina took a deep breath, straightened her general stars, and stepped out into the humid southern air. The crunch of her polished boots on gravel announced her presence before she reached the door. Inside, the murmurs rose like a wave. "That's Regina Walker, 4-star general now. Think she forgot where she came from?" The whispers collided in the stuffy air of Thompson's funeral services, where her mother's body lay in a mahogany casket surrounded by roses. Regina kept her chin high, her steps measured. A lifetime of command had taught her to read a room, and this one was divided as clearly as a battlefield. On one side, elderly black church ladies nodded with fierce pride. On the other, the town's white establishment figures huddled together, their disapproving glances poorly masked by funeral etiquette. "Baby girl." Aunt Clara's voice cracked as she reached for Regina. Her aunt's small frame seemed to have shrunk since their last visit, but her embrace was still strong enough to make Regina's eyes sting with tears. "I'm here, Aunt Clara," Regina whispered, holding her close. "I'm here now." "Your mama would be so proud," Clara said, pulling back to study Regina's face. "Look at you, all decorated like a Christmas tree. She kept every newspaper article about you, you know, even that big spread in Time magazine." Regina smiled despite the ache in her chest. "She called me that morning, screaming so loud I thought something was wrong. Then she told me she'd bought every copy in Martin's drugstore." Their moment was interrupted by Reverend Ellis, who approached with careful steps. His collar seemed too tight, his manner too cautious for a man of God. "General Walker," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome home, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "Reverend?" Regina replied, shaking his hand firmly and noting how his eyes darted around the room. "Thank you for being there for Mother in her final days." He lowered his voice. "Might I have a word, in private?" Regina followed him to a quiet corner, away from the gathering mourners. The Reverend's forehead was beaded with sweat despite the funeral home's aggressive air conditioning. "I know you've been away a long time," he began, dabbing his face with a handkerchief. "Things here, well, they're delicate, balanced, you might say." Regina's jaw tightened. "Balanced on whose backs, Reverend? Now that's exactly what I mean." He glanced nervously at the white faces across the room. "Your mother understood how things work here. She knew when to speak and when to—" He trailed off under Regina's steady gaze. "When to accept injustice," Regina finished for him. "That's not the woman who raised me." "Please," Ellis whispered urgently. "For everyone's sake, just stay quiet during your visit. Pay your respects and go back to Washington. Don't stir up trouble." Regina stepped closer, her voice low but sharp as a blade. "My mother taught me that silence in the face of wrong is its own kind of sin, Reverend. Maybe you forgot that lesson." The service itself was a study in segregation, with mourners automatically separating themselves by race in the pews. Regina delivered a eulogy that made the church ladies dab their eyes and made the white officials shift uncomfortably in their seats. She spoke of her mother's strength, her dignity, her quiet defiance in teaching Black history when it was forbidden in schools. After the final prayers, Regina hugged her aunt goodbye, promising to stop by later. The drive to her mother's house took her down familiar streets where memories lurked behind every corner. The park where whites-only signs once hung, the diner that still served Black customers from the back door, the courthouse where her mother had protested voter suppression. The house itself stood proud despite its age, a small Victorian that her mother had maintained meticulously on a teacher's salary. Regina had offered many times to buy her something bigger, but Sarah Walker had always refused. "This house knows our history," she would say. "Every crack, every creak tells our story." Lost in thought, Regina almost missed the flash of blue lights in her rearview mirror. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel as the police cruiser's siren chirped once, signaling her to pull over. Years of military discipline kept her movements calm as she guided her vehicle to the curb, but her mind was already racing through protocols and procedures. She kept her hands visible on the steering wheel, her military ID ready on the dashboard, and her face a mask of professional neutrality. Regina stepped out of her SUV with the same measured control she would use exiting a military transport. "Good evening, officers," she said, her voice carrying the authority of decades of command. Her military ID caught the light as she held it steady. Officer Grant Langford swaggered forward, his hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. Behind him, Officer Vance Whitaker spread his feet wide, adopting an aggressive stance that Regina recognized from countless confrontations. It was the posture of someone looking for trouble. "Well, well," Langford drawled, barely glancing at her ID. "What we got here? Playing dress-up girl?" "I am General Regina Walker, United States Army," she said, keeping her tone level and professional. "Four-star general, currently stationed at the Pentagon. My military ID is right there, along with my registration and insurance." Whitaker's laugh cut through the humid air like a razor. "Listen to her, Grant. General Walker." He made air quotes with his fingers, stepping closer. "Ain't that precious?" "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," Langford ordered, his mock politeness dripping with contempt. "On what grounds?" Regina asked, not moving. "I'd like to know the reason for this stop." Langford's face darkened. "That's resisting." He grabbed her arm roughly, spinning her around to slam her against the SUV's hood. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs, but she did not make a sound. "You're making a serious mistake," Regina said, her cheek pressed against the warm metal. "I suggest you contact your superior officer immediately." "Shut up," Whitaker barked, grabbing her other arm. "You don't give orders here, girl." Across the street, several people had stopped to watch. A young woman raised her phone, recording. Langford noticed and pointed at her. "Hey, stop filming or you're next." When the woman did not lower her phone, Whitaker stormed over, snatched it from her hands, and smashed it on the pavement. "Anyone else want to try?" he shouted at the growing crowd. Regina's military training screamed at her to fight back, but decades of experience had taught her when to hold position. This was not a battlefield where strength could win. This was a different kind of war. Langford grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. "Think you're special in that uniform? Think you can come back here acting all high and mighty?" The next moment exploded in pain as he swept her legs out, driving her hard into the ground. Before she could catch her breath, Whitaker's boot slammed into her ribs. "Not so mighty now, are you?" he sneered, delivering another kick. "Disgrace to the uniform." Regina tasted blood, but kept her face composed. She fixed her eyes on the gathering crowd, memorizing faces. Those who looked away, those who watched in horror, those who seemed to enjoy the spectacle. Langford knelt beside her, his knee pressing into her back as he roughly cuffed her wrists. "You know what your problem is?" he hissed in her ear. "You forgot your place, coming back here with your fancy stars thinking you're better than everybody." "Every action you're taking is being witnessed," Regina said calmly, despite the pain shooting through her ribs. "Every illegal move is being documented." Whitaker laughed again, but this time there was an edge of uncertainty. More phones had appeared in the crowd, held high despite his earlier threat. He looked around nervously, then kicked the phones out of the nearest hands, sending them skittering across the pavement. "Anyone else recording goes to jail!" Langford shouted, hauling Regina to her feet. Her uniform was dirty now, streaked with blood from her split lip. But she stood straight, her dignity intact, despite their efforts to strip it away. The crowd parted as the officers dragged her toward their cruiser. Regina caught glimpses of familiar faces, people who had nodded respectfully at the funeral just hours earlier, now averting their eyes. A few older black residents made moves to step forward, but she gave them a subtle headshake. This was not their battle to fight. Not yet. Whitaker opened the back door of the cruiser with unnecessary force. "In you go, General." He shoved her inside, making sure her head hit the doorframe. Through the window, Regina watched her hometown grow still in the gathering dusk. Porch lights were coming on, casting pools of yellow that seemed to highlight the emptiness of the streets. The witnesses who had gathered began to drift away, their backs turned as if to deny what they had seen. The cruiser's engine rumbled to life. In the front seat, Langford and Whitaker exchanged grins in the rearview mirror, clearly pleased with themselves. They did not notice how Regina's eyes remained sharp and alert, taking in every detail. They did not see her testing the cuffs with subtle movements, assessing her injuries with military precision. And they certainly did not recognize the expression on her face. It was not fear or defeat, but the calculated patience of someone who had faced far worse enemies and emerged victorious. As the police cruiser pulled away from the curb, the last rays of sunlight caught Regina's general stars, still gleaming despite the dirt and blood. In their shine was a promise, not of revenge, but of justice. The kind of justice that would shake this town to its foundations. Regina sat perfectly still on the cold metal bench. Her military bearing remained unchanged despite her aching ribs and the throbbing pain in her face. The holding cell was small, with graffiti-scarred walls and a steel toilet in the corner that reeked of bleach. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor. The sound of boots on linoleum echoed down the hallway. Officer Vance Whitaker appeared, twirling his keys with exaggerated casualness. He leaned against the bars, a smirk playing across his young face. "Comfortable in there, General?" He drew out the title like it was a joke. "Sure is different from your fancy Pentagon office, ain't it?" Regina did not respond. She studied him with the same analytical gaze she had used to assess enemy positions in combat zones. His swagger could not hide the slight tremor in his hands, the way his eyes darted away when she met them directly. "What's wrong? Lost that commanding voice of yours?" Whitaker rattled the cell bars with his nightstick. The metallic clang echoed through the empty holding area. "Not so tough without your stars, are you?" "I'd like to make my phone call now," Regina said quietly, her voice steady despite her split lip. "It's my right." Whitaker's smirk widened. "Oh, now you want to talk about rights? Should have thought about that before you started resisting arrest." "The phone call, Officer Whitaker." She spoke his name deliberately, watching him flinch at the reminder that she knew who he was. "Or would you prefer I add denial of basic rights to the list?" "List?" He tried to laugh, but it came out forced. "What list is that?" "The phone, please." Something in her calm certainty made him hesitate. Then he shrugged, trying to reclaim his bravado. "Fine. Not like anybody's going to help you anyway." He unlocked the cell door. "Try anything funny and you'll get worse than what you got on Main Street." Regina rose smoothly, ignoring the pain that shot through her side. She followed him to a wall-mounted phone near the booking desk. The precinct was quiet at this hour, just a few officers shuffling papers and pretending not to watch. Whitaker leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "Go ahead. Call your fancy lawyer. Won't do you any good in this town." Regina picked up the receiver and dialed a number from memory. Each button press was precise, unhurried. The line rang twice. "Colonel Ramsey?" a crisp voice answered. "Colonel, this is General Walker," she said, her tone professional, as if she were making a routine call from her office. "I apologize for disturbing you at this hour." "Regina, what's wrong?" The colonel's voice sharpened with concern. "I'm currently being held in the Millbrook Police Department following an incident of excessive force during a traffic stop." She spoke clearly, knowing Whitaker was straining to hear both sides of the conversation. "I believe this situation requires the Secretary's immediate attention, perhaps a military tribunal review of civil authority overreach?" Whitaker's smirk faltered. He straightened up, his crossed arms dropping to his sides. "What happened?" Colonel Ramsey demanded. "Are you injured?" "Affirmative. The assault was witnessed by multiple civilians. Phones were confiscated and destroyed by officers Grant Langford and Vance Whitaker." I suspect the dashcam footage may mysteriously malfunction. She paused. Unless immediate federal oversight is implemented. Whitaker's face had lost its color. He was staring at her now, finally seeing not just a uniform he could disrespect, but the full weight of military authority he had foolishly challenged. "Give me 30 minutes, Colonel Ramsey said. "Don't say another word to anyone." "Understood, Colonel. Thank you." Regina hung up the phone with deliberate care. Whitaker tried to recover his swagger. "That's supposed to scare us? Some phone call to your military buddies?" "No, Officer Whitaker, that was just procedure." She turned to face him fully. The wheels of justice move quite efficiently when a four-star general is assaulted by local law enforcement. Before Whitaker could respond, the precinct's main phone started ringing. Sergeant Lowry, a heavy-set man with a florid face, answered it. His expression shifted from annoyance to confusion to alarm. "Yes, sir." "Yes, I understand, but yes. The secretary himself, He pressed the phone to his chest and barked, "Whitaker, get those cuffs off her, now!" Whitaker fumbled with his keys, his earlier confidence evaporating. As he removed the handcuffs, his hands were shaking noticeably. More phones began ringing throughout the precinct. Officers scrambled to answer them, their faces growing increasingly concerned. "Just a big misunderstanding," Sergeant Lowry said, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "We'll have you out of here right away, General Walker. No charges, of course. These young officers, sometimes they get a little overzealous." "Really, just a mix-up," Whitaker added weakly. "No hard feelings?" Regina stood silent, letting them squirm. The precinct had erupted into barely controlled chaos as calls continued pouring in from Washington. She could hear fragments of conversations. "Yes, Senator. No, we never intended. Of course, we respect the military." Sergeant Lowry himself escorted her to the precinct's front door, apologizing profusely with every step. Whitaker trailed behind them, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Your vehicle will be delivered to your residence, fully detailed, no charge," Lowry assured her. "And if there's anything else we can do—" Regina paused in the doorway. Every eye in the precinct was on her. Despite her bruised face and dirty uniform, she carried herself with unshakable dignity. She said nothing. Her silence was more powerful than any threat. Then she walked out into the night, her footsteps echoing on the precinct steps. Only when she was alone in the parking lot did she allow herself a small grimace of pain. Her ribs screamed with each breath, and she could feel blood crusting at the corner of her mouth. But she kept her head high, her back straight. She had lost this skirmish, but the real battle was just beginning. Regina adjusted her freshly pressed uniform in her mother's antique mirror, wincing at the purple bruise blooming across her cheekbone. No amount of makeup could fully conceal the evidence of the assault, but that was fine with her. Let them see what their police had done. Her phone buzzed with the text from Mayor Clayton Reeves's office. "Press conference at City Hall, 9 o'clock sharp. Your presence is required. Not requested. Required." The presumption made her jaw tighten. City Hall was a white-columned building that dominated the town square. Its Confederate memorial statue still stood proud out front despite years of protests. As Regina climbed the steps, reporters swarmed around her with microphones and cameras. "General Walker, how do you respond to claims you resisted arrest? Will you be filing charges against the officers? Is the Pentagon really investigating our police department?" She moved through them with military precision, neither rushing nor slowing her stride. The clicking of cameras followed her into the building's marble lobby, where Mayor Clayton Reeves waited with an artificial smile stretched across his face. Police Chief Elias Brockman stood beside him, looking like he had swallowed something sour. "General Walker," the mayor's voice boomed for the cameras, "thank you for joining us this morning." He extended his hand, his signet ring catching the light. Regina studied his hand for a moment, just long enough to make him sweat before shaking it. More camera flashes erupted. "Chief Brockman and I want to personally apologize for yesterday's unfortunate incident," Reeves continued, gesturing to the police chief. "Isn't that right, Chief?" Brockman stepped forward, his handshake brief and crushing. "There was clearly a breakdown in proper procedure," he said stiffly. "The officers involved have been placed on administrative leave pending review." The reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Regina noticed how the mayor positioned himself between her and the cameras, making sure he was centered in every shot. "Now then," Reeves announced, "if you'll excuse us, the general and I have some private matters to discuss." He gestured toward his office, his smile never wavering. The heavy oak door closed behind them with a definitive click. The mayor's office was all leather and mahogany, reeking of cigars despite the no-smoking ordinance. Chief Brockman followed them in, immediately moving to stand by the window, his bulk blocking much of the natural light. The moment the door closed, Reeves's smile vanished. "Sit down, Regina." She remained standing. "I prefer to stand, Mr. Mayor." "Still as stubborn as your mother," Reeves said, dropping into his leather chair. "That's what got her in trouble, too." Regina's eyes narrowed at the mention of her mother, but she kept her voice level. "Is there a point to this meeting beyond the photo op?" "The point," Brockman growled from the window, "is that you're fixing to tear this town apart with your Pentagon threats and civil rights nonsense." "You mean by exposing police brutality and systematic corruption?" Regina met his glare steadily. "That's not tearing the town apart, Chief. That's cleaning it up." Mayor Reeves leaned forward, his fingers forming a steeple. "Look, Regina, we all want what's best for Millbrook. This is a peaceful town, a prosperous town. Do you really want to destroy that peace over one misunderstanding?" "A misunderstanding?" Regina's voice could have frozen hell. "Your officers assaulted a United States general, destroyed evidence, and violated multiple civil rights. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime." "Those boys made a mistake," Brockman said. "They've been disciplined. Let it die here." "Like you let die all the other complaints against your department?" Regina asked. "All the other mistakes that just happened to target black citizens?" The mayor's face darkened. "Be careful, Regina. Your family has deep roots here. Your mother's house, her church membership, her reputation. It would be a shame to see any of that compromised." "Is that a threat, Mr. Mayor?" "It's a reality check," Reeves said smoothly. "Things can get very difficult for people who don't understand how this town works. Property taxes can spike unexpectedly. Building code violations can appear out of nowhere. Police response times can become unreliable." Regina took 2 steps forward, planting her hands on his desk. Both men tensed. "Let me give you a reality check, gentlemen. I've faced down warlords and terrorists. I've commanded troops in active war zones. If you think you can intimidate me with small-town thuggery, you clearly don't understand who you're dealing with." "Nobody's trying to intimidate anyone," Reeves said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "We're simply having a friendly conversation about civic harmony." "This conversation is over." Regina straightened up. "And gentlemen, document everything you own. You'll need the inventory for the federal investigation." She turned and walked out, leaving them sputtering behind her. The reporters tried to swarm her again, but she moved through them like they were smoke. The drive to the cemetery was automatic. She needed to visit her mother to draw strength from the woman who had taught her to never back down. But as she approached the family plot, she saw something was wrong. Her steps quickened. Her mother's headstone had been defaced with spray paint. Crude racial slurs covered the granite in angry red letters. The fresh flowers from the funeral were scattered and trampled. Someone had even carved "Go home" into the grass. Regina's knees gave out. She collapsed before the desecrated grave, her fingers digging into the earth. All her military discipline, all her careful control, cracked. A sound escaped her throat, part sob, part roar of rage. Her whole body shook with fury as she stared at the vile words marring her mother's final resting place. The kitchen in Regina's mother's house had not changed in 30 years. The same yellow curtains hung over the sink. The same rooster-patterned wallpaper peeled at the corners. Aunt Clara moved around the space with familiar efficiency, setting out plates of fried chicken and collard greens. "You barely touched your food, child," Clara said, watching Regina push a piece of chicken around her plate. "Your mama would have my hide if I let you waste away." Regina's fork clinked against the china. "I can't eat, Aunt Clara. Not after what they did to Mama's grave." Clara's weathered hands trembled as she poured more sweet tea. "I heard about that. Reverend Ellis is organizing a cleanup crew for tomorrow morning." She settled into her chair with a heavy sigh. "But baby, that's exactly why you need to leave. These people, they're dangerous. They always have been." "So we just let them win?" Regina's voice was quiet but hard. Let them keep hurting our people? I've lived here 74 years, Clara said. Taught 3 generations of children in segregated schools. I've seen what happens when we push too hard, too fast. They burned down the Williams store in '65 just for hiring black cashiers. They shot Robert Turner's boy for registering voters in '72. Her voice cracked. I can't bear to see you hurt. Regina reached across the table and took her aunt's hand. I understand your fear, Aunt Clara, but I'm not that little girl anymore. I've commanded battalions, led missions. I know how to fight smart. This isn't like your wars, Regina. There are no rules here, no Geneva Convention. These people will... A knock at the back door cut her off. They both tensed until a familiar voice called out. Miss Clara? It's Quentin Reed. Clara hurried to unlock the door. Quentin Reed stepped into the kitchen, his press badge still hanging around his neck. He had grown stockier since high school, with threads of gray in his beard, but his eyes still held that same intense curiosity that had made him editor of the school paper. Regina Walker. He grinned. Still causing trouble, I see. Regina stood to hug him. Quentin Reed, still chasing stories? Speaking of stories, he pulled a thick manila envelope from his messenger bag and spread documents across the kitchen table, pushing aside dinner plates. I've been tracking police misconduct in this county for years. Look at these patterns. Regina leaned over the papers. Complaint forms, hospital records, obituaries. Names and dates jumped out at her. Broken bones, wrongful arrests, suspicious deaths. They bury the evidence, Quentin explained. Change reports, intimidate witnesses. But I've got sources inside the department. People who've been waiting for someone like you, someone they can't just make disappear. Clara wrung her hands. Quentin Reed, don't you go putting dangerous ideas in her head. She needs to leave while she still can. With respect, Miss Clara, leaving is exactly what they want, Quentin said. They count on good people running scared, but Regina's got something none of their other victims had. Rank, resources, and a direct line to Washington. Regina studied a photo of a young black man in a hospital bed, his face swollen beyond recognition. When did this happen? 3 months ago. Official report says he fell downstairs during arrest. Same officers who attacked you, by the way, Langford and Whitaker. They're the chief's personal attack dogs. Clara touched Regina's shoulder. Baby, please. Your mama wouldn't want... Mama would want justice, Regina cut in. She spent 30 years watching this town crush people's spirits, teaching us to keep our heads down, stay quiet, survive. But survival isn't enough anymore. She gathered the documents, straightening them into a neat stack. I didn't fight wars overseas to surrender at home. Not when the enemy is right here wearing badges and sitting in City Hall. Quentin pulled out his car keys. I've got more files at my office. Police records, internal affairs complaints, everything they tried to bury. We can start connecting the dots tonight. Clara grabbed Regina's arm. At least wait until morning. These back roads aren't safe after dark. The dark is exactly what we need, Aunt Clara, Regina said gently. That's when the truth comes out. She kissed her aunt's cheek. Lock up after we leave and don't worry. I learned a few things about watching my 6 in Afghanistan. The night air was thick with humidity and cricket song as Regina and Quentin walked to his car. The streetlight cast long shadows across her mother's front yard where she had played as a child, dreaming of a world bigger than this small town's prejudices. You sure about this? Quentin asked as they climbed into his beat-up Corolla. Once we start digging, they'll come at us hard. Regina buckled her seatbelt. Her military posture remained unchanged even in the passenger seat. Let them come. I've got 30 years of tactical experience and a few stars on my shoulder. What do they have? Fear, Quentin said, starting the engine. Fear of losing power. That makes them dangerous. Fear makes them sloppy, Regina corrected, and sloppy enemies make mistakes. They pulled away from the curb, headlights cutting through the darkness. Spanish moss hung like gray ghosts from the trees lining the narrow road. In the distance, a train whistle moaned, a lonely sound that echoed across the town. Quentin navigated the familiar curves, the car's tires crunching on gravel. Your mama would be proud, you know, standing up like this. Regina watched the shadows slide past her window. I know. That's why they're so scared of me. Because I'm my mother's daughter. And this time, I've got the power to make them pay. Dawn painted the courthouse steps in pale gold as Regina climbed them, her shoes clicking against worn marble. The building stood like an aging giant, its columned face a reminder of times when justice served only some. Quentin trailed behind her, clutching his messenger bag full of files. At the top of the steps, a young woman in a sharp navy suit paced while talking on her phone. "No, tell the witness we can protect." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Regina. "I'll call back. General Walker?" She extended her hand. "I'm Brielle Cole. Quentin called me last night." Regina shook her hand, noting the firm grip and the fire in the younger woman's eyes. "You're the attorney who's been filing those police misconduct suits." "Trying to," Brielle said, "but cases keep disappearing into thin air. Judge Thompson claims they're misfiled or the paperwork's incomplete." She pulled out a ring of keys. "Lucky for us, I worked here through law school. I know where they hide the bodies, metaphorically speaking, I hope." She led them through a side door, past empty offices where early morning light cast long shadows through Venetian blinds. The basement archives smelled of dust and forgotten paper. Row after row of metal shelving disappeared into the gloom. "The cases we want should be here," Brielle said, unlocking a storage room. "If they haven't been shredded." Quentin sneezed as they pulled boxes from shelves. "Some of these go back 20 years. Regina lifted a file labeled Johnson, Marcus, Traffic Stop Incident. Inside, she found autopsy photos of a black teenager, his neck bruised from what the report called accidental asphyxiation during routine arrest. "I remember this case," she said. 2003. The boy's mother talked with my mama. Police said he choked himself. "Look at the signature on the coroner's report," Brielle pointed out. "Dr. William Reeves." "Reeves?" Regina's head snapped up. "Like Mayor Clayton Reeves?" "His brother," Quentin confirmed. "The mayor's family has tentacles everywhere. Police, medical examiner's office, judges, property developers. They've run this county since segregation." They spread more files across a dusty table. Patterns emerged like bloodstains, repeated names, similar cover stories, identical signatures burying the truth. "Here's another one." Brielle held up a thick folder. "Sarah Martinez, 2015, suicide in police custody. But look at these photos. Defensive wounds on her arms, bruising patterns inconsistent with hanging." "The investigating officer?" Regina asked. "Grant Langford." Brielle's voice hardened. "Same cop who attacked you, and here's his partner Vance Whitaker's name." Quentin pointed to another file. 2018 shooting of an armed suspect, except the victim was a 60-year-old man with a cane. Regina's jaw tightened. "How many?" "I've counted 15 suspicious deaths in custody since 2000, Brielle said, plus dozens of assault complaints that vanished. But these are just the ones they bothered to file. My clients tell me most victims are too scared to report anything." "Or they can't," Quentin added. "I've got sources inside the department, good cops who hate what's happening, but they've seen what happens to whistleblowers. One officer tried reporting Langford in 2016. 2 days later, drugs were found in his locker. He's still in state prison." Regina studied a photo of Officer Langford receiving a commendation from Mayor Reeves. Both men smiled at the camera, the mayor's hand on Langford's shoulder like a proud father. "The mayor's not just covering up crimes," she said. "He's rewarding them, building his own private army." "With federal funding," Brielle nodded. "I traced grant money meant for community policing. Instead, they bought military-grade weapons, surveillance equipment. They're preparing for war against their own citizens." "Then let's give them one," Regina said. "But first, we need witnesses willing to testify, hard evidence that can't disappear." Quentin pulled out his notebook. "I've got names, people who've been waiting years to tell their stories. But they need protection, real protection, not empty promises." "I can help with that," Regina said. "I still have contacts in the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, and friends in Congress who owe me favors." Brielle gathered the most damning files into her briefcase. "I'll start drafting subpoenas. Once we file in federal court, they can't make these disappear." "Be careful with those," Quentin warned. "If they know we have copies." "I've got a secure place," Brielle patted her case, "and backup scans encrypted in 3 different clouds. I learned after they accidentally flooded my office last year." They climbed back to the main floor as the courthouse stirred to life. Early morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, making dust motes dance like golden snow. "Meet me at my office at noon," Brielle said. "I'll have the initial paperwork ready. We can start interviewing witnesses this afternoon." Outside, the humid air wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. Regina scanned the street out of habit. 2 decades of combat training had taught her to always check her surroundings. A dark sedan with tinted windows idled across the square. "Quentin," she said quietly, "that car, it was parked outside your office last night." He glanced over casually. "No plates, and I recognized the dent in the rear panel. Been seeing it a lot lately." "They're not even trying to hide anymore," Brielle muttered. Regina watched the car through narrowed eyes. "Good. Let them watch. Let them see us gathering ammunition. By the time they realize what kind of fight they're in, it'll be too late." Regina's old Buick creaked down Pine Street, where crumbling houses lined both sides. Brielle sat in the passenger seat, reviewing her notes. "Jerome Williams lives at the end," she said. "Number 1247. Been there 30 years before the beatings left him in a wheelchair." They pulled up to a small yellow house with peeling paint and a wooden ramp leading to the front door. Wind chimes tinkled softly on the porch, their gentle music at odds with the heavy atmosphere. "Quentin said Jerome was a deacon at First Baptist," Regina said, climbing out. "Taught Sunday school with my mother before 3 cops broke his spine during a traffic stop. Then charged him with assaulting an officer," Brielle finished. Regina's knuckles whitened as she gripped her cane, a temporary necessity after her own encounter with Langford and Whitaker. They climbed the ramp together, each step deliberate. Brielle knocked. "Mr. Williams? It's Attorney Cole. We spoke on the phone." Silence stretched for long moments. Then came the soft whir of an electric wheelchair. The door opened a crack, revealing a thin face lined with old pain. "You shouldn't be here," Jerome Williams said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They watch this street." "We know," Regina stepped forward. "But we need your help, Mr. Williams. I'm General Walker, Marie Walker's daughter." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Little Regina? Lord have mercy." He glanced past them at the empty street. "Come in quick and pull those curtains shut." They entered a living room filled with family photos and religious texts. A hospital bed occupied one corner, surrounded by medical equipment. Jerome positioned his wheelchair by a worn armchair. "Your mama was a good woman," he said. "She visited every week after it happened, brought food, read scripture." His hands trembled. "She didn't deserve what they did to her garden last month." Regina leaned forward. "Mr. Williams, we're gathering evidence, building a federal case. We need your story." Fear crossed his face. "I can't. I signed papers. They made me promise." "Who made you promise?" Brielle asked gently. "Chief Brockman himself." Jerome's voice dropped even lower. "Came to my hospital room. Said if I breathed a word about what really happened, my grandkids would never be safe in this town." Regina felt her jaw clench. "When was this?" 7 years ago, right after they killed my Marcus." His eyes filled. "My boy wasn't even involved, just saw something he shouldn't have when he was walking home from work. Next day they plant drugs in his car. He dies in custody. They say suicide." A tear rolled down his cheek. "Chief says I keep quiet about my beating, or my other children get the same." Brielle pulled out her phone. "Mr. Williams, we can protect your family. I have contacts at the FBI Witness Protection Program." "You don't understand," he interrupted. "Brockman owns everybody. Judges, mayors, state police. Man's got friends in Congress. My Marcus tried telling the truth. Look what happened." Regina stood, pacing the small room. "I'm not a local judge, Mr. Williams. I command a military division. I've got my own friends in Washington, real power, the kind Brockman can't touch." Jerome studied her for a long moment. Then he wheeled himself to a bookshelf, pulled out a Bible, and extracted a thick manila envelope from inside. "Your mama helped me hide these," he said. "Been keeping them safe, waiting for the right time." His hands shook as he handed over the envelope. Pictures, documents, things Marcus gathered before they killed him. Regina opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of photographs, evidence of police brutality spanning decades. Officers posing with bloody batons, proud grins over beaten bodies, Chief Brockman's signature on falsified reports. "This one." Jerome pointed to a photo of young officers celebrating in a bar. "That's Brockman when he was just a sergeant. See what they're holding? Those are trophy wallets. Took them off men they beat to death." Brielle documented each photo with her phone. "These are inadmissible without testimony," she said. "Mr. Williams, would you—" A crash of breaking glass cut her off. Something heavy smashed through the front window, followed by more impacts. Regina instinctively shielded Jerome as rocks pelted the room. "Get down," she ordered. her combat training taking over. She crawled to the nearest rock. Crude letters spelled "Shut Up" in red paint. More glass shattered. Outside, tires squealed. "You have to go." Jerome wheeled himself to a corner, trembling. "They'll be back. Take the pictures. Use them. But please, don't let them know it came from me." Regina gathered the scattered photos while Brielle helped Jerome into a back room away from the broken windows. Wind whistled through the jagged holes, stirring papers across the floor. "We'll send someone to board these up," Regina promised. "And I'm posting private security on your house tonight. Just go," he pleaded, "before they come back. And Regina?" He caught her hand. "Your mama would be proud. She always said you'd be the one to break their power." They hurried back to Regina's car, the envelope of evidence clutched tight. As they pulled away, Regina checked her mirrors. Empty street, no witnesses to the attack. But 3 blocks later, headlights blazed to life behind them. "Same car from the courthouse," Brielle said, twisting to look back. "No plates." The unmarked sedan stayed 4 car lengths back, matching their every turn. Regina gripped the steering wheel tighter, taking a sharp right turn onto Maple Avenue. The unmarked car's headlights still blazed behind them, refusing to give up the chase. "Call Quentin," Regina told Brielle. "Tell him to meet us at First Baptist, now." Brielle's fingers flew across her phone. "What about the tail?" "Let them follow." Regina's voice was steel. "It's time to bring this fight into the light." Within 30 minutes, Regina stood at First Baptist doors as people streamed in. Families, elderly couples, young activists with phones recording. Word had spread fast through the black community. General Walker was making her stand. The church's ancient wooden pews creaked under the weight of bodies packed shoulder to shoulder. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across worried faces. Near the front, Quentin sat with his laptop open, ready to live stream. A handful of white allies dotted the crowd, including 3 retired teachers and a local business owner. Regina noticed Reverend Ellis shifting uncomfortably in his chair near the pulpit. He had tried to discourage this meeting, warning her again about keeping peace. But he could not deny her use of the church, not with half his congregation demanding it. She checked her watch. It was time to begin. That's when the back door swung open. Chief Elias Brockman entered, flanked by 2 plainclothes officers. He chose to stand against the rear wall, arms crossed, his face a mask of cold attention. Regina did not flinch. She stepped to the podium, her dress uniform crisp despite the summer heat. The crowd fell silent. 3 nights ago, she began, her voice carrying to every corner. I was assaulted on Main Street by officers sworn to protect and serve. They didn't know I was a general. They just saw what they wanted to see, a black woman they could hurt without consequences. Murmurs of recognition rippled through the pews. Too many had similar stories. They threw me in a cell thinking I'd break. Regina's words cut like a blade. But in that cell, I remembered something my mother taught me. She said, "Baby, dignity isn't what they take from you. It's what they can never touch." "Amen," several voices called out. "They tried to break me in that cell," Regina continued, "but they broke their own masks instead, because now we see them clearly. Every false report, every covered-up crime, every life they've destroyed while hiding behind badges." She pulled out the photos from Jerome's envelope, holding them high. "We have evidence. We have witnesses. We have truth that's been buried too long." In the back, Brockman's face darkened. One of his officers reached for a phone. "Look around this room." Regina gestured to the crowd. "Every family here has a story. A brother beaten during a traffic stop. A cousin who resisted arrest while handcuffed. A father who died in custody from natural causes." Heads nodded. Some people wiped tears. They count on our fear, our silence. They think we'll keep looking away, keep swallowing their lies, keep accepting their boot on our necks. Regina stepped from behind the podium, her voice rising. "But I didn't spend 20 years commanding troops, defending this country's principles, to watch those principles die in my own hometown. I didn't earn these stars to let corrupt men disgrace everything they represent." The crowd surged to their feet, applauding. Even some of the white allies stood, their faces set with determination. Today we stop being afraid, Regina declared. Today we speak our truth. Today we demand justice, not just for me, but for every victim of their abuse. The applause grew thunderous. Near the pulpit, Reverend Ellis slowly rose. The room quieted as he approached the microphone. I have been silent too long, he began, then cleared his throat. Hoping peace meant safety. Hoping silence meant survival. His hands gripped the podium. But silence is its own kind of violence, and I cannot, will not, be violent to my own people anymore. Regina saw tears in the old preacher's eyes. This church stands with General Walker, he declared. We demand accountability, we demand change, and we will not rest until justice is done. The crowd erupted again. People hugged, cheered, raised their fists in solidarity. Quentin's laptop captured it all, broadcasting live across social media. At the rear of the church, Chief Brockman had not moved. His face remained expressionless, but his eyes burned with cold fury as he watched the scene unfold. Regina met his gaze steadily, unflinching. One by one, people came forward to speak. A mother whose teenage son was paralyzed during an arrest. An elderly man describing years of harassment. A white shop owner admitting she had witnessed police brutality but had been too scared to report it. Each story strengthened their collective resolve. Each truth pushed back the darkness. Regina watched hope and determination replace fear in her neighbor's eyes. The meeting stretched past 2 hours, but no one left. They were united now in purpose, in anger, in commitment to change. As the last speaker finished, Regina returned to the podium. This is just the beginning, she promised. We have more evidence to share, more witnesses coming forward. We will not be silenced. We will not back down. And we will not stop until every corrupt officer, every complicit official faces justice. The crowd rose one final time, their voices raised in agreement. But Regina kept her eyes on Brockman, still watching from his post at the back wall. His stone-cold expression never wavered. The church parking lot buzzed with energy as people lingered, exchanging phone numbers and making plans. Regina stood with Quentin and Brielle near her car, their voices low but urgent. The momentum's perfect, Brielle said, rifling through her briefcase. I've drafted emergency injunctions against the police department. We can file first thing tomorrow. Quentin nodded, typing notes on his phone. My editor's already committed to a front-page story. Between the live stream and these testimonies, we've got them cornered. Regina watched the last few cars pull away, their taillights disappearing into the darkness. Be careful, both of you. Brockman isn't going to take this lying down. Let him try something, Brielle scoffed. We've got too much evidence now, those photos from Jerome alone. Speaking of evidence, Quentin cut in. I'm meeting a source at midnight, former dispatcher who says she has internal records showing pattern and practice. Regina frowned. That late? She's terrified of being seen. Works the night shift at the hospital now. He shrugged. Only time she felt safe. Take someone with you, Regina insisted. Can't. She'll only talk one-on-one. Quentin checked his watch. I better get moving, meeting her behind the old warehouse district. Before Regina could protest further, he was heading to his car. She watched him drive off, a knot tightening in her stomach. He'll be fine, Brielle assured her. Look, I've got the preliminary filings ready. Want to review them over coffee? They drove to the all-night diner on Henderson Street. The fluorescent lights made Brielle's legal papers glow an eerie white as they spread them across the scratched formica table. Regina sipped bitter coffee while Brielle outlined their strategy. We hit them with everything, the young attorney explained. Civil rights violations, excessive force, pattern of discrimination, conspiracy to obstruct justice. Her phone buzzed, then Regina's. Then both their phones exploded with notifications. Oh, God, Brielle whispered, staring at her screen. Quentin! Regina was already on her feet, car keys in hand. They raced to the warehouse district, but police cars had the area cordoned off. Through gaps in the emergency vehicles, Regina glimpsed a crumpled form on the ground, surrounded by paramedics. Quentin! She shouted, trying to push through. An officer blocked her path. Active crime scene, ma'am, no civilians allowed. I'm a United States Army general, and that's my friend. Don't care if you're the Queen of England. The officer smirked. Area's restricted. They could only watch helplessly as the ambulance screamed away, sirens wailing into the night. Regina's hands shook with rage. "I'll go to the hospital," Brielle said. "You should—" Two police cruisers suddenly pulled up. Officers emerged with weapons drawn. "Brielle Cole," one called out. "Hands where we can see them." "What? What is this?" "You're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute." They grabbed her roughly, spinning her around to cuff her. "That's ridiculous," Regina stepped forward. "Stand back, General," an officer warned, "unless you want more trouble." They searched Brielle's car, making a show of finding a plastic bag of white powder in the trunk. Regina watched in horror as they drove away with Brielle in the back seat, her face pressed against the window in desperation. Exhausted and angry, Regina finally returned to her mother's house near dawn. She flipped on the TV for news about Quentin, but instead saw her own face filling the screen. Disturbing footage released today shows U.S. Army General Regina Walker assaulting police officers during a routine traffic stop, the anchor announced. The video played grainy body cam footage, clearly edited. It showed only Regina's hands striking out, cut together with officers falling back. Her voice, stripped of context. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Sources within the Pentagon expressed concern about General Walker's mental state, the reporter continued. Her recent behavior suggests a pattern of volatility and abuse of rank. Regina gripped her uniform cap, knuckles whitening as the lies continued to unspool. Photos flashed across the screen. Quentin bloody on the pavement, Brielle in handcuffs, protesters looking angry and violent. Local authorities suggest Walker's inflammatory rhetoric may have incited violence at a church gathering earlier tonight, the anchor droned on. The Pentagon has declined to comment on whether an investigation into the general's conduct is pending. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Clara. "Turn on Channel 7. Different station, same story. Rogue general threatens small-town peace." The body cam footage played again, edited to make her look unhinged and dangerous. Regina's grip tightened on her cap until she thought the brim might snap. Everything they had built tonight, the unity, the hope, the momentum, was being twisted into something ugly and false. Quentin lay in a hospital bed. Brielle sat in a jail cell. And here she was, alone in her mother's living room, watching lies destroy everything she had fought for. The news anchor's voice droned on, each word another twist of the knife. Coming up, an exclusive interview with Police Chief Elias Brockman about his department's ongoing efforts to maintain order in the face of outside agitation. Regina stared at her uniform hanging on the coat rack, at the stars that had once meant something about justice and honor. The cap in her hands felt heavier with each passing moment, weighted down by the responsibility of what came next. On screen, the edited footage played yet again. Her own voice, distorted and out of context, echoed through the empty house. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Regina drove through the pre-dawn darkness to Memorial Hospital. The night shift nurse eyed her uniform suspiciously, but directed her to the ICU. The sight of Quentin hit her like a physical blow. He lay still against white sheets, face swollen and purple, tubes snaking from his arms. The steady beep of monitors provided a grim rhythm to match her heartbeat. She settled into the hard plastic chair beside his bed, careful not to disturb any of the equipment. "I'm here, Quentin," she whispered, gently touching his unmarked hand. "I'm right here." His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. When they found her face, he tried to smile, but winced instead. "They really did a number on me, huh? Don't try to talk too much." She leaned closer. "The doctors say you have 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and a severe concussion." "Worth it." His voice was barely audible. "Got the records in my jacket. They didn't find them." Regina's throat tightened. Even beaten half to death, he was thinking about the evidence. "Quentin, I'm so sorry. I should never have let you go alone." "Stop." He squeezed her hand weakly. "My choice. Always my choice." His breath rattled. "Don't let them win, Regina. Don't you dare let them win." She sat with him until his eyes drifted closed again, watching his chest rise and fall with each labored breath. The sun was climbing over the horizon when she finally left, casting long shadows across the hospital parking lot. At home, Aunt Clara was waiting on the front porch, worry etched deep in her face. "I saw the news," she said as Regina climbed the steps. "Child, what are they doing to you?" Inside, The morning light filtered through dusty curtains her mother had hung decades ago. Regina sank onto the familiar couch, suddenly bone-tired. Aunt Clara bustled around the kitchen, returning with a steaming mug of coffee. "You have to stop this," Clara said softly, settling beside her. "Look what they did to Quentin. Look what they did to that young lawyer girl. They won't hesitate to do worse." "I can't stop." Regina stared into her coffee. "You know I can't." "Your mama wouldn't want you martyring yourself like this." Clara's voice cracked. She always said, "Sometimes surviving means knowing when to be quiet." Mama survived so I could do more than just survive. Regina set the untouched coffee down. "They beat me in the street, Aunt Clara. They're framing Brielle. They nearly killed Quentin. How quiet am I supposed to be?" "I buried your mama last week." Tears slid down Clara's weathered cheeks. "Don't make me bury you too." Regina stood and walked to the old rotary phone mounted on the wall. It was ancient, but she knew it was one line they could not tap. She dialed a number from memory. Colonel Ramsey answered on the second ring. "I've been expecting your call. How bad is it at the Pentagon?" "Bad." His voice was grim. "The Chief of Staff is getting pressure from senators to launch an inquiry into your conduct. That body cam footage is running on every major network. It's doctored and you know it." "Of course I know it." Ramsey sighed heavily. "But that's not what matters to them. Regina, you're rattling cages that go all the way to Washington. The mayor's got connections in Congress. The police union's involved now. So I'm supposed to just let them win?" "I'm saying you need to understand what you're up against." His tone softened. "These people, they don't play by rules. They've already tried to destroy your reputation. Next time..." He left the sentence hanging. "Are you telling me to back down, Colonel?" "I'm telling you to watch your six." The military phrase carried extra weight. "I've got intel suggesting they're considering more permanent solutions to their Regina Walker problem." Aunt Clara had been listening from the doorway. She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. Regina thanked Ramsey and hung up. She walked to the living room where her mother's portrait hung above the fireplace. Those eyes, so much like her own, seemed to stare right through her. The same proud chin, the same unbending spine. Her mother had worked as a maid in the mayor's house, suffering daily humiliations with quiet dignity. She had saved every penny to send Regina to college, to give her a chance at something better. When Regina had earned her commission, her mother's face had shone with fierce pride. "What would you do, Mama?" Regina whispered to the portrait. "What would you say if you could see what they've done?" The house creaked around her, full of memories. Here was where her mother had bandaged her scraped knees, telling her to be brave. Here was where she had helped Regina polish her first lieutenant's bars, hands trembling with joy. Here was where she had sat in her final days, still giving Regina strength even as her own ebbed away. Aunt Clara touched her shoulder. "Baby, please, we can't lose you too." Regina reached up and squeezed her aunt's hand, but her eyes never left her mother's portrait. "I won't stop," she whispered, each word a promise. "I won't stop until justice is done. Not for me, not for Quentin or Brielle, for every person they've hurt, every voice they've silenced. For you, Mama, for everything you couldn't say." She straightened her shoulders. "For you, Mama, for everything you couldn't say." The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the portrait like a spotlight. For a moment, Regina could have sworn she saw her mother's painted lips curve into the smallest of smiles. Regina descended the worn wooden steps into the church basement. Each creak echoed in the dim space. A dozen veterans sat in folding chairs, their faces lit by flickering fluorescent lights. Some wore pieces of their old uniforms, a camo jacket here, combat boots there. Others were in civilian clothes, but their military bearing was unmistakable. Sergeant Rico Vargas, who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, stood as she entered. "General Walker," he said, snapping to attention. "At ease, Sergeant." Regina looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes. "Thank you all for coming." "Ma'am," Vargas said, "we've been watching what's happening. What they did to you." His jaw clenched. "It ain't right." Regina pulled up a chair, sitting at their level rather than standing over them. "What they did to me is just the tip of the iceberg. Quentin Reed found evidence of decades of abuse, cover-ups, deaths swept under the rug." "We know," said Corporal Lena Jenkins, her prosthetic leg glinting in the light. My brother tried to report police harassment last year. Next thing you know, he's got drugs planted in his car, lost his job, his reputation, everything. One by one, they shared similar stories. A nephew beaten during a traffic stop. A cousin arrested on false charges. Each tale sparked nods of recognition around the room. We took an oath, Regina said, her voice steady and clear, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to protect the rights and dignity of every American citizen. She leaned forward. That oath didn't expire when we took off the uniform. What can we do? Vargas asked. They've got the power, the connections. They have fear, Regina corrected. Fear is their weapon, but we're soldiers. We know how to face fear. The basement door cracked open. Reverend Ellis descended slowly, followed by 3 elderly men Regina recognized from town. Their faces bore the weathered look of those who had carried heavy burdens too long. These men want to speak, the Reverend said softly. The first man, James Wilson, cleared his throat. 1985, he began. My boy was walking home from work. Police said he fit a description, beat him so bad he never walked right again. His hands trembled. They told us if we complained, they'd come back and finish the job. The second man described his brother's death in custody, ruled a suicide despite obvious signs of violence. The third spoke of his grandson, framed and imprisoned on fabricated evidence. Regina watched the veterans' faces as they listened, saw the familiar righteous anger building in their eyes, the same fire that had driven them to serve, to protect, to fight injustice. The church basement is yours, Reverend Ellis announced. Whatever you need. It's time this town had a reckoning. Vargas stood. General, you've got my support, and my truck. We can use it to transport supplies, set up a command center here. I've got communications equipment from my ham radio club, Jenkins added. We can coordinate safely off their networks. One by one, the veterans stood, offering skills, resources, connections. A medic volunteered to treat anyone afraid to go to the hospital. A former MP offered legal knowledge. A supply sergeant knew how to get necessary equipment without raising flags. More townspeople arrived, slipping down the stairs like shadows coming into light. A teacher whose student was assaulted by police. A nurse who had documented suspicious injuries. A former clerk who had been forced to alter records. Regina organized them with military precision, creating teams, establishing secure communication protocols, setting up shifts. The basement transformed into an operations center with maps of the town pinned to walls and lists of incidents cataloged by date. We're not here for revenge, Regina reminded them. We're here for justice. Everything we do must be legal, documented, and irrefutable. We're going to build a case they can't bury or deny. They'll come at us hard, Vargas warned. Let them, Regina replied. This time we're ready. This time we stand together. As the night deepened, more people arrived. Mothers whose children had been terrorized. Workers who had witnessed corruption. Each brought a piece of the puzzle, a thread of truth to weave into their tapestry of evidence. Reverend Ellis moved among them, offering quiet words of encouragement. His earlier caution transformed into resolute support. The church has been silent too long, he told Regina. We forgot that sometimes faith requires action, not just prayer. Near midnight, Regina climbed the stairs to get some air. As she stepped outside, she stopped short. The church grounds were filled with people, dozens of them, each holding a candle. The flames flickered in the darkness like earthbound stars. Mrs. Johnson, who ran the local diner, stood nearest the door. We heard you were meeting, she said softly. We wanted you to know you're not alone anymore. The candlelight illuminated faces of all ages, all backgrounds. Some she recognized, others were strangers, but all wore the same expression of quiet determination. An elderly woman Regina knew from her mother's church group approached, her candle cupped carefully in gnarled hands. Your mama would be so proud, she whispered, so proud to see you standing tall. Regina stood on the church steps, surrounded by the gentle light of solidarity. The night air carried the scent of wax and hope, and for the first time since the assault, she felt the weight on her shoulders lighten slightly. These people, her people, had found their courage, found their voice. The candles burned steadily in the still night, each flame a silent declaration. We are here. We are watching. We will not be silent anymore. Quentin lay propped up in the hospital bed, his face still swollen and bruised. Tubes snaked from his arms, and a heart monitor beeped steadily beside him. Despite his condition, his eyes were sharp and alert when Regina entered the room. "You look terrible," she said softly, taking the chair beside his bed. "You should see the other guys," Quentin croaked, attempting a smile that turned into a wince. "Though I didn't actually see them. Cowards hit me from behind." Regina's jaw tightened. "We'll find out who did this." "Already know who ordered it?" Quentin's voice was weak but bitter. "Brockman's fingerprints are all over this. Not literally, he's too smart for that. But his boys did the work." A nurse poked her head in, checking Quentin's vitals. Once she left, Quentin shifted painfully in the bed, lowering his voice. "Before they jumped me, I hid something. In the old Peterson mausoleum at Oak Hill Cemetery." Regina leaned closer. "What?" "Flash drive. Everything I've gathered over the past 5 years. Raw footage from police dash cams showing beatings. Audio recordings of cops bragging about planting evidence. Financial records." He paused to catch his breath. "Proof of kickbacks between Brockman, Mayor Reeves, and New Horizon Corrections, the private prison company." Quentin nodded. "They get paid per prisoner. More arrests mean more profit, and our local officials get a cut of every contract." His monitors beeped faster as he grew agitated. "The whole system is rigged. They're literally making money off putting our people behind bars." Regina put a steadying hand on his arm. "Easy. Save your strength." "Back of the mausoleum," Quentin continued. "Loose brick on the bottom right. Had to hide it fast when I spotted them following me." "I'll get it," Regina assured him. "You focus on healing." "Be careful," Quentin warned. "They know I had something. That's why they came after me. If they find that drive first, they won't." Regina left the hospital through a side entrance, watching for surveillance. The veterans she had recruited had already spotted 3 unmarked police cars monitoring the building, but they had also set up their own counter-surveillance. Sergeant Vargas's truck was parked nearby, ready to run interference if needed. The cemetery was silent in the late afternoon heat. Regina walked purposefully, as if visiting a grave, while scanning for watchers. The Peterson mausoleum stood on a small rise, its marble facade stained with age. She knelt as if praying, her fingers finding the loose brick Quentin had described. The flash drive was there, wrapped in plastic and tucked deep into the gap. She slipped it into her pocket, just as footsteps crunched on gravel nearby. "Paying respects, General?" Chief Elias Brockman's voice dripped false concern. He stood blocking the path, 2 officers flanking him. "My mother's buried here," Regina replied calmly, standing to face him. "Or did you forget your men desecrated her grave? Terrible business, that vandalism, still unsolved." Brockman's smile did not reach his eyes. "Speaking of unsolved crimes, we're very concerned about Mr. Reed's assault. Any idea what he might have been working on that would provoke such violence?" "You tell me, Chief. You seem to have theories about everything else in town." Brockman stepped closer. "Just trying to keep the peace, General, but some people seem determined to stir up trouble, to dig up things better left buried." His gaze flicked to the mausoleum behind her. "Like poor Mr. Reed. Such a shame what happened to him." "Yes," Regina agreed. "A shame how many things happen in this town. But nothing stays buried forever, Chief. You should know that." She walked past him, forcing herself not to hurry. His voice followed her. "Some things should stay buried, General, for everyone's sake." Back at the church basement, Regina connected the flash drive to a secure laptop Vargas had provided. Hours of footage played across the screen. Dashboard cameras showed officers planting evidence, beating suspects, coordinating false arrests. Audio recordings captured casual discussions of quotas and kickbacks. Spreadsheets detailed payments flowing between New Horizon Corrections and shell companies owned by Brockman and Reeves. Brielle arrived, still wearing her clothes from jail. "Bastards held me 3 days before allowing bail," she spat. "But they messed up. False arrest means everything they did is going to blow back on them." She examined the files, her lawyer's mind cataloging violations. "This is dynamite. Police corruption, conspiracy, RICO violations. We need federal investigators to verify the authenticity of everything." "Already handled," Regina said. "I called in some favors. A team from the Justice Department is en route, and I've got military intelligence specialists standing by to authenticate the recordings. Brielle's eyes gleamed. Once this is verified, we take it straight to federal court. No local judges they can pressure or buy off. They'll try to stop us, Regina warned. Let them try. Brielle's voice was steel. I've got the ACLU backing me now, and every civil rights organization in the state is watching. They can't disappear all of us. Regina's phone buzzed with a news alert. She read it aloud. Pentagon announces formal inquiry into allegations of systemic police misconduct. Special investigative committee to examine claims of corruption and civil rights violations. It's starting, Brielle said softly. No, Regina corrected. It's ending. They just don't know it yet. Through the basement window, they could see police cars racing past the church, lights flashing. Upstairs, phones were ringing as national media caught wind of the story. The carefully maintained system of corruption that had ruled the town for decades was about to face the light of day. The flash drive sat on the table between them, its small blue light blinking steadily. Such a tiny thing, Regina thought, to carry so much truth, so much power. But that is how change often came, not in grand gestures, but in small moments of courage, a hidden drive, a spoken truth, a refusal to stay silent. The Civic Center buzzed with tension as hundreds packed the main hall. News cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. Regina sat straight-backed at the witness table. Her decorated uniform was crisp despite the stuffy air. She could feel the weight of every stare, but her military training kept her posture perfect, her expression neutral. Chief Brockman lounged in his chair at the defense table, suit jacket unbuttoned, projecting casual confidence. Mayor Reeves sat beside him, nervously adjusting his tie every few minutes. Behind them, a row of stone-faced police officers filled the first bench, a show of force in uniform blue. Senator Harrison, leading the Pentagon inquiry panel, tapped his microphone. This hearing will come to order. His voice cut through the murmurs. We're here to investigate allegations of systemic police misconduct, civil rights violations, and potential criminal conspiracy in the operation of local law enforcement. Brockman leaned forward, speaking smoothly into his microphone. Senator, I want to state for the record that these accusations are completely unfounded. General Walker is pursuing a personal vendetta after a routine traffic stop went wrong due to her own aggressive behavior. Regina did not flinch at the lie. She had expected this, the same practiced denial they had used for years. Chief Brockman, the senator continued, you maintain that your officers acted appropriately during General Walker's arrest? Absolutely. Brockman's voice dripped false sincerity. The edited body cam footage clearly shows. Edited footage? Regina interrupted calmly. An interesting choice of words, Chief. She nodded to Sergeant Vargas at the back of the hall. The overhead screens flickered to life, showing multiple angles of that night. The raw, unedited footage began to play. The first gasps came as the video showed Regina calmly presenting her military ID. Then, the brutal escalation, officers laughing as they slammed her down, the kicks to her ribs, racial slurs clearly audible, the smashing of witnesses' phones, the chief's voice on radio ordering, "Clean up that mess." Brockman's face hardened. That footage is clearly doctored. It's authenticated, Regina cut in, by military intelligence specialists, every frame, every audio track. She gestured to a thick binder, including metadata proving when and how your department altered the versions released to the media. Mayor Reeves's hand shook as he reached for his water glass. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The screen shifted to new footage. Years of dashboard cameras showed similar beatings, officers planting evidence, coordinated harassment. Each clip was dated, logged, verified. But this goes beyond mere brutality, Regina continued. She produced financial records, their details magnified on screen. These documents show systematic coordination between city officials, the police department, and New Horizon Corrections Corporation. Spreadsheets filled the displays, payment trails, shell companies, kickback schemes. A quota system, Regina explained. More arrests meant more prisoners meant more profit. And certain officials, her eyes locked on Reeves, received very generous consulting fees through offshore accounts. The mayor's face had gone ghostly pale, Brockman's casual posture had vanished, replaced by rigid tension. "That's all circumstantial," the chief snapped, but his voice had lost its smoothness. "Perhaps these make it clearer." Regina played audio recordings, Brockman's own voice discussing payoffs, Reeves laughing about keeping the cells filled, instructions for targeting specific neighborhoods, specific demographics. The hall erupted in angry shouts. The senator banged his gavel for order. "There's more," Regina said once the noise settled. "Mr. Quentin Reed, a local journalist, was brutally attacked after uncovering this evidence. We have testimony from the officers ordered to assault him. 2 uniformed policemen stood from the audience. "We're prepared to testify about Chief Brockman's direct orders," one announced. "We're done covering for him." Brockman's face contorted with rage. "You traitors! The only traitor here," Regina's voice cut through his outburst, "is the man who betrayed his oath to serve and protect, who turned law enforcement into a profit center built on human suffering, who ordered violence against American citizens for daring to speak truth." She turned to face the chief directly. "You didn't just fail this community, Chief. You deliberately destroyed lives for money. And you were too arrogant to imagine anyone would dare stand against you." The mayor suddenly lurched to his feet. "I had no choice," he blurted. "Brockman threatened my family if I didn't cooperate." "Shut up, you fool!" Brockman snarled. But it was too late. The senator's voice cut through the chaos. "Federal marshals, take them into custody!" Dark-suited marshals moved forward as reporters surged from their seats shouting questions. Camera flashes strobed through the hall. Brockman stood, knocking over his chair, but found himself surrounded. The mayor slumped in defeat as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "Chief Elias Brockman, Mayor Clayton Reeves," the lead marshal announced. "You're under arrest for civil rights violations, conspiracy, witness tampering, and corruption under the Riceau statute." Regina watched silently as they were led away. She could see the shock on Brockman's face, the disbelief that his carefully built kingdom could crumble so completely, that a black woman he had tried to humiliate could bring him down. The reporters pressed closer, microphones thrust forward, questions overlapping. "General Walker, how does it feel to see justice served? Will you push for broader police reform? What message do you have for other departments engaging in similar practices?" But Regina's attention was on the row of citizens in the back, the families who had lost loved ones to police violence, the survivors of beatings, the witnesses who had been silenced for years. Their faces showed a mix of tears and fierce triumph. For them, this was not just about one corrupt chief or one compromised mayor. This was about breaking a system of oppression that had ruled their lives for generations. The courthouse steps buzzed with energy as news crews jostled for position. Satellite trucks lined the street, their dishes pointed skyward, beaming the story across the nation. Regina stood at the podium, her uniform gleaming in the afternoon sun. Behind her, federal agents led a handcuffed Chief Brockman and Mayor Reeves toward waiting vehicles. The crowd that had gathered swelled by the minute. Cell phones recorded every moment as people spilled onto Main Street, their voices rising in unified chants. "Regina, Regina, Regina." She gripped the podium, momentarily overwhelmed by the surging waves of support. These were not just locals. People had driven from neighboring towns, some from hours away, drawn by breaking news of corruption exposed and justice served. "The system didn't fail today," Regina's voice carried across the square. "The people who corrupted it failed. And now they'll answer for their crimes." A thunderous cheer erupted, signs bobbed above the crowd. "Thank you, General Walker. Justice at last. No more corrupt cops." Quentin Reed, still moving gingerly from his injuries, stood to the side with his camera, documenting everything. His newspaper would run a special edition tonight, but the story had already gone viral. National networks were breaking into regular programming with live coverage. Governor Phillips hurried up the courthouse steps, flanked by aides. His face was grim as he approached the microphone. "In light of today's revelations, I am announcing an immediate state takeover of the local police department. Federal oversight will be implemented, and a complete review of all personnel and procedures will begin immediately." The crowd roared approval. The governor raised his hands for quiet. "Furthermore, I have directed the state attorney general to establish a special task force. Every case handled by this department for the past decade will be reviewed." Every complaint of misconduct will be investigated, and every victim of abuse will have their voice heard. Regina watched as people in the crowd embraced, some crying openly. Years of fear and forced silence were breaking like a dam. A woman pushed forward through the press of bodies. "My son!" she called out, voice shaking. "They planted drugs on my son 3 years ago. He's still in prison." "My brother too," another voice joined in. "Beat him senseless during arrest." More people stepped forward, each with a story of abuse, of lives destroyed by corrupt police. Stories they had been too afraid to tell before. Brielle Cole, freshly released from her fraudulent arrest, stood on the courthouse steps with a legal pad, taking down names and details. "We're filing class action suits," she announced. "Every family affected will have their day in court, and this time justice will be on their side." The young attorney's eyes blazed with purpose as more people lined up to speak with her. Former victims who had been silenced by threats, witnesses who had been intimidated into silence. They came forward one after another, ready to testify. Regina felt a gentle touch on her arm. Aunt Clara stood there, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Your mama would be so proud," she whispered. "So proud." The two women embraced as cameras flashed around them. Regina could feel her aunt trembling. "I was so scared for you," Clara admitted. "But you were right. Sometimes you have to stand and fight." Quentin limped over to join them, his camera hanging around his neck. "The Associated Press is picking up my full investigation," he said. "Every detail, every document, no more covering up the truth." Down on the street, the crowd had started singing, an old civil rights hymn that brought goosebumps to Regina's arms. The voices rose, strong and clear. "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around." Reverend Ellis appeared, making his way through the crowd. People parted to let him pass. He climbed the steps slowly, his aged face beaming. "The church will open its doors tonight," he announced, "for prayer, for healing, for community." Regina nodded, remembering how he had once cautioned her to stay quiet. Now his eyes held a different message: respect, and perhaps a touch of shame for his earlier fears. The afternoon sun slanted across the square as more people arrived. Food trucks appeared, setting up to feed the growing crowd. Children played on the courthouse lawn while their parents shared stories of survival and hope. The atmosphere had transformed from protest to celebration, from anger to possibility. News helicopters circled overhead, capturing aerial views of the masses below. Social media exploded with hashtags: Justice in Dixie, General Walker strong, corrupt cops down. Regina watched it all from the courthouse steps, standing between her aunt and her old friend. For the first time since returning home, the weight of grief and rage lifted from her shoulders. Her mother's death had brought her back, but something larger had kept her here. A calling to fight one last battle, not with weapons, but with truth and courage. The chants continued to ripple through the crowd, "Regina, Regina, Regina." But she was not listening to her name anymore. She was watching faces in the crowd, young and old, black and white. Some she recognized from her childhood, others who had driven miles to be here. Their eyes held something she had not seen in this town before: hope. Aunt Clara squeezed her hand. "You did it, baby girl. You really did it." Quentin snapped one last photo, then lowered his camera. "What happens next?" he asked softly. Regina looked out over the sea of faces, feeling at last a deep sense of peace. Her uniform no longer felt like armor, just a reminder of the oath she had taken to protect and serve, an oath that had led her right back home, where the real battle for justice had been waiting all along. The breeze rustled through the trees surrounding the cemetery, carrying the sweet scent of fresh flowers. Regina stood before her mother's restored headstone, now adorned with countless bouquets brought by townspeople. The marble gleamed, scrubbed clean of the hateful slurs that had once defaced it. Pink roses, white lilies, and purple irises created a rainbow of colors against the gray stone. Nearly 200 people gathered in respectful silence. Some held small American flags, others clutched programs for the ceremony. Aunt Clara sat in a folding chair in the front row, her silver hair caught by the wind, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Quentin Reed, still walking with a slight limp but growing stronger each day, moved through the crowd taking pictures. His newspaper coverage of the police department's downfall had earned him a Pulitzer nomination. Brielle Cole stood nearby, elegant in a black suit, reviewing notes for the class action lawsuits that were already making their way through the courts. Regina adjusted her uniform jacket, making sure every medal and ribbon sat perfectly straight. She had chosen to wear her full dress uniform today, honoring both her military service and her mother's memory. The brass buttons caught the morning light as she stepped forward to the small podium that had been set up. "My mother taught third grade in this town for 37 years, Regina began, her voice carrying clearly across the cemetery grounds. She believed in education, in lifting up the community, in fighting injustice with knowledge and dignity. When I told her I wanted to join the Army, she said only one thing: 'Baby, wherever you serve, serve with honor.'" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Many there had been taught by Regina's mother, remembered her gentle strength and quiet determination. "The past few months have exposed deep wounds in our community," Regina continued, "wounds that festered because good people were afraid to speak up, wounds that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. But wounds don't heal in darkness. They need light, truth, and proper care." She gestured to a large poster board display showing architectural renderings. "That's why today I'm announcing the creation of the Walker Justice Foundation. We've secured funding and support from national civil rights organizations, veterans groups, and private donors. Our mission is simple: to fight systemic abuse and ensure equal justice under law." Applause broke out as Regina outlined the foundation's plans. A legal aid clinic would provide free representation to victims of police misconduct. A scholarship program would support children of incarcerated parents. Community oversight boards would monitor local law enforcement. Training programs would teach citizens their rights and how to document abuse. "But this foundation isn't just about fighting wrongs," Regina said. "It's about building something better. My mother believed in this town's potential. She saw past its flaws to what it could become. Today, we start making her vision real." Reverend Ellis stepped forward to offer a prayer. His voice trembled with emotion as he asked for blessing and guidance. The crowd bowed their heads, many joining hands across racial lines that had once seemed uncrossable. Brielle Cole took this podium next, announcing that her law firm would partner with the foundation. "We've already identified over 300 cases that need review," she said. "People wrongly convicted, excessive force complaints buried, families torn apart by corrupt police. The foundation will help us fight for every single one." Quentin shared news that other towns had reached out, inspired by their success. "What happened here is spreading," he said. "Communities across the South are standing up, demanding accountability. The Walker Foundation will help them too." Governor Phillips's office had sent a representative who pledged state support for the foundation's work. Several corporations announced matching grant programs, but the most moving moments came from local residents stepping forward with personal pledges. "I ain't got much," said an elderly man who had lost his grandson to police violence, "but I'm giving $10 every month to keep this going." "My church's youth group will volunteer," a young pastor offered. "I'm retiring next year," a white high school teacher announced. "I'll tutor kids for free in the foundation's after-school program." One by one, people came forward, each offering what they could: money, time, skills, space. A community knitting itself back together, determined to prevent future injustice. Regina watched it all, her heart full. She thought of that night in the holding cell, how alone she had felt. Now she stood surrounded by hundreds who had found their voices, their courage, their power to change things. Aunt Clara joined her at the podium, placing a hand on her arm. Together they unveiled a small bronze plaque that would be mounted on the foundation's building. It bore a quote from Regina's mother: "Education lights the path to justice." The ceremony drew to a close as the sun broke through clouds that had threatened rain all morning. Golden light bathed the gathered crowd, catching the tears on many faces. Regina stood straight and proud before her mother's grave, now a place of honor rather than shame. She touched the cool marble of the headstone, fingers tracing her mother's name. The sweet scent of flowers filled the air as more people came forward to add their bouquets to the growing display. Every blossom represented a story, a hope, a commitment to change. Regina lifted her head, feeling the warm sunlight on her face. Around her, the community that had once turned away in fear now stood united in purpose. She thought of all the battles ahead, all the work still to be done. But for the first time, she knew with absolute certainty that they would succeed. "This time," she whispered, "we win." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.